he can
Francesca,
get away
you're
with
accusing
getting
me of
rid of the
fascism. That's a
Department
big
of Education.
charge. All I would point out is that it's not my party that's imprisoning its political opponents.
Right.
So a while ago on this channel, I talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And basically, it's the cognitive bias in which one overestimates their ability in a certain area. It's essentially the opposite of the imposter syndrome. And one person who I feel does a good job of exposing this cognitive bias in some people is the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles, but generally does it in a calm and collected way. And in many times, he causes one of few things to happen. People yelling at him,
Not help anybody in the categories of anxiety or depression or suicidality, but in at least one of those cases, it actually makes those things worse. I'm not sure he heard my answer to him. He was screaming some sort of profanities there in the back.
or they start protesting him. But then sometimes he'll come face to face with somebody who disagrees with him and will later invite them to sit with him and have a respectful conversation. And shows that by meeting people where they are, people can remain friendly and civil. And at the end of it, we'll give them props.
I think, Wes, you don't give yourself enough credit. You're here, you listen to these arguments, you parse them rationally, you say, in some cases, I guess in this speech tonight, you say, I actually agree with his arguments, but I came in disagreeing and my first principles are a little different, so I'm going to have to consider that. Because you're very nice. Wes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All of which I believe makes him one of the most superior in this kind of space, because he shows how dialogue should go. And it should send a message that if you disagree with somebody, that's totally fine. Just be civil and make sure that you come prepared. Because people like Michael Knowles are intellectually brilliant, and I still, for the life of me, can't understand why people don't come prepared. Which is exactly what happened on Piers Morgan when he went head-to-head with somebody on the Trump verdict.
I happen to believe, Piers, that it's good for America when you hold the person who has the highest office in the land to the standards of the American law.
When you look at the federal charge against Trump, there was a poll that came out when that charge was brought that showed 62% of Americans think that it's primarily politically motivated. In the early Trump campaign, the Democrats tried to stop him from being president by spying on him and cooking up fake intelligence, ironically enough, with Russia. That didn't work. Then they tried to throw him out by impeaching him twice. That didn't work. Then they tried to kick him out by rigging the election and changing all the voter rules, in some cases in contravention of state constitutions leading up to that election. That did get him out of office, and he did leave office, but then he didn't go away. He kept running again. So then they indicted him 4 times. Now they've convicted him. They're going to threaten to throw him in prison. This has absolutely nothing to do with the law. As was noted earlier, at most you're talking about a misdemeanor that would have already expired under the statute of limitations. So my fellow panelist here is celebrating that the rule of law has been vindicated and overturned 234 years of American legal tradition. I would challenge her to see if she could possibly articulate how and what crime Trump committed, because Trump didn't commit any of the crimes for which he's been convicted.
Well, let's just ask quickly before I go to Kevin. Francesca, just on that point, what crime did Trump commit?
It was financial crimes. It was white collar crimes. That is exactly
Which
what
one,
they
though?
charged him. He was convicted on.
What was the crime?
It's New York state law.
I understand. What was the crime?
It is New.
Francesca,
I don't even like it. It is
Well,
literally
hang on, Mark,
he just got convicted on 34 counts.
Francesca, what was the crime?
I really feel bad for her. I do. This is what happens. Continue.
So you are not allowed to use your own financial, like your own money, to pay off somebody, and then he logged it as something different. He logged it as just a regular payment, but he was actually paying off this porn star to keep quiet, which, if he hadn't been running for president, would not have mattered, but he was, and so it impacted campaign finance laws in New York State. Okay, that is what Juan Merchan just oversaw this. Alan Bragg brought these charges because Michael Cohen, his sister, was already sentenced to 3 years to do it.
Let's just go before Kevin. I'll be very, very, very patient. We'll come to you.
Look, I'm no expert. Let me just say, hang on.
No,
Michael,
you
are no expert. That's
fine. At least she admits that she's not an expert. That takes courage. And I love how Knowles is smirking because he knows that she's getting triggered and can't even name the actual crime that he committed. Why? Because the courts couldn't come to an actual unanimous decision on what exactly the crime was that he committed. But before we get into that, let's recap, just in case you haven't been keeping up with the news, on why he was indicted in the first place. Hopefully you know the basics, that this was related to hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels for an alleged affair that they had back in 2006, nearly 20 years ago. And the 34 counts that he was charged with corresponds to an individual check, invoice, or voucher to Michael Cohen, his former lawyer. And basically, there was a structure that Cohen would be repaid for him paying off Stormy Daniels. Cohen would send an invoice for each payment, calling it his retainer payment. And when he'd get paid, they called it a voucher for a legal expense, which came from Trump's trust and his personal account. And they called it falsification of business records, which can either be a felony or a misdemeanor. Which, by the way, the statute of limitations for a misdemeanor in New York is 2 years. Now for Trump, he was charged as a felony, which there must be intent to commit another crime or aid or conceal in another crime, which prosecutors argued for a violation of New York election law to conspire or prevent the election by unlawful means. And there were 3 potential unlawful means laid forth: a violation of federal campaign finance laws, falsification of other business records, or a violation of tax laws. Jurors did not need to agree on what exactly those unlawful means were, just that he did so with the intent to defraud and intended to commit another crime. Which the violation of campaign finance or tax laws, neither of them seem sound given the context. And the fact that the jurors just had to throw up their hands and say, well, he did so with the intent to commit some sort of other crime, but we don't know what exactly that crime was, should tell you all you need to know. That this was a sham, that this was a kangaroo court. And if that isn't your burden of proof, see Joe Biden's response to the trial.
Mr. President, can you tell us, sir, Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir?
And Francesca really thought that she could go in with all that confidence and people would just eat it up. But people aren't that stupid. And it should really tell you something when Republicans like Mitt Romney, who voted to impeach Trump in 2020, said Bragg should have settled the case against Trump, that he may have won the battle for now, but may have lost the political war, and that putting out the Trump fire with oxygen is political malpractice. And even Mark Garagos, a Democratic lawyer, weighed in.
Look, let me just say, I like Francesca a lot. And we probably agree on 80% of our worldviews. However, Francesca, the way you just described it, call me afterwards and I'll educate you, because that's not what happened. There was no theory that was given to the jurors. The jurors were told it could have been campaign finance, it could have been tax, it could have been false books. They were told they didn't have to specify, and specifically told they did not have to agree unanimously. That's what irks me. Lifelong Democrat, no fan of Trump, never voted for Trump, never will. But I will tell you, as somebody who has spent his entire career with kind of taking on unpopular causes and holding the government accountable, I have to tell you, I do that for a reason. And the reason is this kind of shenanigans, and that's the best light I can spin it on in the criminal courts, has no place in a federal election.
No.
And you would think that after this, when somebody who's more in her corner than he is in Michael Knowles' corner, she would have conceded at least a little bit. But no, in her hubris, she continued.
We see you're laughing, but Mitt Romney, for Mitt Romney to come down so squarely on the side of Trump.
I do want to just say, look, so the crimes were falsifying business records. Now, the reason I didn't know that before is because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not the journalist who is anchoring this entire show, who should have told you that it was falsifying business records.
I mean, it's your job to do your research before going on the show, but okay.
Now, on
And
the other
because
point,
those aren't felonies,
I hear you that most Americans don't care about falsifying business records. I agree with Kevin and I agree with Piers. However, I will say this. Most Americans also are very much go on gut, and they don't like that a candidate is now a convicted felon, but moreover, this candidate is someone who, and it is not the crime, however we know, cheated on his pregnant wife with a porn star in a hotel in Lake Tahoe and then bragged about it and then tried to pay her to shut up, and also paid another Playboy bunny to also be quiet about their relationship.
Bill Clinton had sex with an intern in the Oval Office.
And also, he paid $850,000 to settle the case with no criminal conviction.
Anything you have.
Well, it's not a bad thing to have.
No one's
unlike
talking
Trump,
about
he
Bill
was
Clinton.
president at the time.
You know, I don't mean to pick on Francesca too much here, but it's very telling that even the liberals who are going on television to defend this ruling have to Google in the breaks to figure out what the crime was. and even then, I'm sorry to say, misrepresent what the actual supposed crime was. The reason here that this has to take... Well, excuse me one second.
Again, take some accountability and do your job next time.
Jessica,
I
I'll just
said
finish
he
my
was
point
cooking
real
the
quickly.
books. That's the same thing.
Yeah. It's not a felony, not a crime. But anyway, that's a point for another time. The reason why even the great defenders of this conviction can't Yes, to you as well. The reason that they can't articulate this is because it's not really a crime. That's why they had to upend 234 years of precedent for this. Donald Trump was always going to be the Republican nominee in 2024, and Trump poses a real threat to the liberal establishment. He's not a Mitt Romney type Republican. He has different views from the so-called uniparty on things like trade, on things like immigration, and things like foreign policy and war. Trump posed a major threat. That's why they took such extraordinary measures for the last 8 years to take this guy out. They weren't able to do it politically. They weren't even really able to do it at the ballot box. So what's left? The only thing left to do is to try to throw him in prison so that he can't campaign for the election.
It's New York state law. So the idea that this is somehow politically motivated is all made up in your head, because what you
Biden's
do
DOJ is
on
also
your show
prosecuting
every
Donald
day
Trump twice.
is you groom your audience for fascism, and you set them up for a complete takeover of the DOJ. This is all about allowing Trump to get away with any crime he wants, as you sort of slighted and
Francesca.
sort of, he was impeached twice. Doesn't really matter that he tried to blackmail the leader of Ukraine into digging up non-existent dirt on Joe Biden, but that doesn't matter to you
Joe
or
Biden
your
threatened to
followers.
withhold arms.
You want to make sure
Francesca,
that when
you're
Trump is
accusing me
reelected,
of
he
fascism.
can get away.
That's a big.
He can
Francesca,
get away
you're
with
accusing
getting
me of
rid of the
fascism. That's a
Department of
big charge.
Education.
All I would point out is that it's not my party that's imprisoning its political opponents
Right.
now.
Boom. Roasted.
And this is exactly why you don't go on debating anybody, especially somebody like Michael Knowles, without doing your research first. Because in a desperate attempt to save yourself, you'll start saying things that make no sense, and you'll end up digging yourself deeper in the hole. But people like Francesca, in their hubris, think that they're smarter than they actually are. But people see right through it. Now we talk about Trump derangement syndrome. As I've pointed out before with Bill Maher, this girl has it far worse. And I think she speaks for a lot of people, because whether or not you're pro-Trump, you do need to be pro-due process. And if you believe that you're pro-due process and you agree with the results of this trial, I do implore you to challenge your beliefs, because only in a dictatorship do we weaponize the justice system and imprison our political rivals. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, hopefully I've earned a subscription. Here's some videos for you to watch in the meantime. Until next time, peace out.